Okay, so that's wonderful. All right, guys, so let's continue our journey into data analysis with R. Last time, I promised that I was going to show you an application that I developed with one of us. And okay, so I just want to show it to you very quickly. Okay, so it's and all this was made in R. Okay, Kinley, hi. I hope you're doing good. All right, so all this was made with R, and it came from a data set, that was taken from, basically found online, John Hopkins, and they have a lot of, COVID-19 data, and so this very simple app, we have some mapping stuff here, this was done, this is done in R with a package called Leaflet, very simple, and you have, some interactive component here. So this is for Africa, okay, my beautiful continent, Asia, and these points here are countries, and when you click on a point, it tells you the number of cases. Actually, when we were working on the data set, the latest date for the data was um, May 6th, as you can see here. So it tells you the number of active cases, confirmed cases, diseased and recovered, Turkey, and then you got that. If you want to go to Europe, then you have it here. This would be, France, Spain, and so on and so forth, Iceland, okay, and then you have all the data there, okay, and you have all the continents. Of course, Oceania, you have only four different places. Americas, you have all these places, and so on and so forth, okay. So that's the top pane. Now we have two other boxes here. Now this is a country specific analysis of COVID-19 data over time, and of course Afghanistan is the first country because it starts with an A, and it tells you how things have evolved over time for that specific country. And of course you can scroll down. Greece. This is what happened for Greece, and then Jamaica, and so on and so forth. Okay, it tells you what happened over time. And so on the left, you have country specific data, and on the right, you have continent level data. Okay, so in the map here, you have the latest case. Okay, and over here, you have the cases over time. Oh, I got more messages. So what are we looking at, Laura? I'm just showing an application that I made with McNamara. It was all made in R, and it basically uses COVID-19 data. I'm just presenting to you. And Akisi, welcome. I hope you're doing good. So this is for Africa. Number of cases, active, confirmed disease, recovered over time, and then of course in Asia you have a lot more, over time, and Oceania, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's an app that's really really of course it shows you a lot of interesting things. You can kind of interact with your data using it, but then it's fairly simple actually. Now for those of you, I'm pretty sure that most of you have already watched, or if you weren't live, I'm pretty sure that you watched the first recording, the first live class. And one thing that I said about data science was that data science is the process of turning raw materials into finished products, right? So in this case, I want to show you this here would be the finished product, right? That application, with the interactivity and all that. That would be the the finished product. But then, it required some raw material, and I want to show you the raw material. And I think the example that I used back then was, the example of, oops, sorry, of a meal. You have some ingredients and then you turn them into dishes. So that's basically it, guys. So this is where we started. This is the raw material. And honestly, as a human being, you can't really do much with this. And when I say do much, I mean you can't look at it and then start, deriving insights and whatnot from a data set like this. This would be the CSV file that we started with. Okay, but then from this CSV file, using the right tool, and that's R in this case, this is what we came up with. Interactive stuff. All right. And then you have some mapping and stuff like that. It's actually pretty interesting. So this is an example of what data science is. Of course, in this case, we are making a map, but it could just be, a plot like this. A plot like this is a finished product. Maybe you need this plot to understand some sort of dynamic, that's going to help you do something. I'm not really sure. But this would be the end product or the finished product of data science. And then this would be used to, make decisions, right? So this is really an example of what data science is. All right, guys. So I promised that I was going to show this to you. So that's why I'm starting with that. Okay, so all right, so this is the project for it. Let me just switch to right here, flight analysis. Oh yeah, the session is busy because it's running the application right now. Okay, so let's go back to our project. Okay, and let's continue. Well, guys, I'm really hoping that you were able. Okay, I was testing a few things here, so I don't really need this. Okay, and this is your project that I'm working on, like the restaurants in NYC. I told you on Slack that I was going to oh, I actually closed everything else. I told you that I was going to assign the first ever project, and I'm still working on it, guys, and it's going to be very interesting. Actually, after this project, the project that will follow would actually be you picking or choosing your own data set and then running any type of analysis you want and then writing a report on it. So I'm going to send you some some data sources basically, and ask you guys to pick one data set that you're interested in and then run some analysis, make some plots, and derive some insights and so on and so forth. Okay, so again, this is not really what we want. They will call it flight analysis. All right, that's it right here. Okay, so this here is what we've been working on. Okay, now I also had feedback from one person who said that he had a bit of trouble following the code because it was a little too small. So I'm going to try to keep it like this now, maybe like that, so that people that have maybe sight problems can see the code much better. Okay, and of course, guys, as you know, it's time to share the live code with you, so let me do it very quickly. Okay, so as always, I'm posting the live code in the chat for you guys. You can have access to it right there. Okay, guys, we've talked about a lot of things, and as I keep saying, you can already do a lot, guys. Don't underestimate what you already know in R and the kind of things that you can do. We have acquired several smaller tools, but these tools, when they are combined, can be used to perform more complex analysis. So today, I'm going to teach you a few more of these tools, okay? And actually, we're going to look at several functions that are kind of interesting and that you may need, basically, for your analysis. But again, actually, you see over here, we looked at the count function and the ungroup function. Actually, I could have taught you on group at the same time as group by, but I wanted you guys to use group by, as much as possible before introducing to you what, the side effects of group by are and how to use on group for that. Okay, let's look at a new subsection. Okay, and let's look at the select function. Okay, select. Okay, for selecting specific columns. Okay, for selecting specific columns. All right, guys. So of course, one thing that I haven't done yet is to load my packages and import my data. Let me do it very quickly. Let me go to the bottom. Okay, so when you look at a data set like flights, for example, we have been working with it for a long time now. We have 14 columns, okay, and even in your own kind of work, you may actually have a very big data set with more than 14 columns. You may have 30 columns, 40 columns, and each column is a specific variable, okay, and this is something that we already know. But it may be that some of the columns, okay, that are there, okay, are not really useful for what you're trying to do, and basically the reason why you use the select function is simply because you maybe want to only keep the columns that you're interested in and just work with those, and basically discard all the other columns that you're not going to need. Okay, so this is how you use the select function, and it's actually very easy to use, as you'll see. And I'm actually going to show you a few more advanced ways of how to use the select function. But let's assume now that the only columns that we want are year, month, and day for some reason. I'm not really sure why you would only want these dates, but hey, let's assume that you want to do something and you only need these dates. So how are you going to use the select function? So just again, like we've been doing, we start with the data set, flights, then we add the pipe operator, all right? Then we use the select function, which means that if you weren't using the pipe, flights would be the first argument of the select function. Okay, I hope you remember the theory behind the pipe. Okay, now at this point, it's really easy. You just list out the columns that you're trying to keep. That's basically what you do. So we want year, we want month, and we want day. Okay, we want year, we want month, we want day. Let's run this code, and when we run it, lo and behold, this only selects these 3 columns for us, and everything else is discarded. Okay, now like if you remember the kind of advice that I always give you, if you try to save this, save it in a different variable, besides flights, because if you use flights, it's going to overwrite the original data. Okay, so you may want to save this in another column, another variable, and you can name it like you want, like flights underscore dates, or something like that, and then you just keep it like that. All right, so you just select what you want, right? And you can list out as many variables as you need over here. You just separate them with commas. That's basically what you need to do there. All right. Okay. So let's add a comment here. Select specific columns. All right. So this is how you would do it. You would just list out the names of the columns. All right. Now this is the second use case. Let's assume that it is easier for you to just specify what you don't want, because let's assume that I want almost all 14 variables except let's say except arrival time and carrier. For some reason I just don't want these 2. Okay, so instead of listing out 12 columns, it's easier to list out only the 2 columns that we don't want, right? And there's a way to do that using the select function. So specify columns we don't or we do not want. Okay, so how do we do that? Flights, select. Okay, now in a case like this, in order to specify the columns you do not want, you just precede them with a negative symbol. Okay, minus symbol. All right, so minus arrival time, comma, minus carrier. Okay, so when I run this, now let's check the number of columns we have. We have 12 columns because arrival time, which was between these 2 columns, is not there anymore, and carrier was around here, right? And as you can see, it's not there anymore. Okay, so you can specify the columns you do not want, okay, by just adding a minus in front of it, like that. Okay, now, so this is basically how you use the select function, okay? And everything else that I'm going to show you about with the select function right now is, it's really a more advanced way of arriving at the same results. But with these two ways of selecting columns, you can pretty much do whatever you need. Actually, with the first method here, you can do whatever you need. Just like, if you want to achieve this, it's going to take you a little more time, but you can basically achieve that as well by just listing out all 12 columns that you want. Okay. All right. Now over here, specify a sequence of columns. Does the word sequence of columns, does the word sequence work here? Yeah, sequence, one after the other. Okay. All right, so what do we mean by sequence? What we mean is, columns that are, next to one another, okay? That's basically what a sequence of columns here means, okay? Columns that are next to each other, okay? So let's assume that, okay, Leonard is asking, why specifying columns that we do not want? Can we use the exclamation mark instead? And this question stems from the fact that specifying values that we do not want inside the filter function required us to use the negative symbol. And the answer is no. The answer is no, for reasons that if you're a little more advanced in R, you would. Okay, I think you are the person who asked me about logical values and factor values, when we're looking at data types. I think, some weeks back, you are the person who asked the question. Now, basically, the exclamation mark is used for logical values. And inside the filter function, all the conditions that you specify inside the filter function. Okay, so since you're asking me, let me just show very quickly. So let's say you want all the flights operated by, AA, I'm going to delete these guys. I'm just entering a question. So you'll do carrier equals AA, right? And when you run this code, it's going to specify all, or it's going to basically filter out the entire data set using this. Now, the reason why the exclamation mark works here is simply because, when R evaluates this condition, this is basically transformed into logical values. This is actually what happens under the hood. Flights, actually, I'm going to teach this to you at some point. This is base R. This is, all the values of flights inside the carrier column. Let me run this so that you see what I'm talking about. So these are all the values listed out, as a sequence. The actual name for it is a vector, but we're going to talk about data types. Now, equals AA. All right. Now, this is basically what happens. You see, it is transformed into a series of trues and false. So for the first value, let's check the first value of the flights data set. Okay, the first value is UA. Okay, so it looks at if the first value is equal to AA and it's false, so it's going to return a false. For the second one, it's false, so it's going to return a false. But for the third one, it's true, so it's going to return a true. Okay, let's check this again. All right, you'll see that the first three values are false, false, and true because the third value is a true, right? And this is basically what happens. Now, when we use the exclamation mark, the reason why it works here is because exclamation mark only works on logical values. So the reason why I'm doing this, I'm showing you this, is just to show you that this is logical. Okay, but over here, you're not really comparing anything, or you're not really testing whether anything is true or false. So this is why the exclamation mark is not going to work here. Okay, exclamation mark is used for logicals. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. Okay, let's go back to specify sequence of columns. So again, a sequence of columns here means columns that are next to one another. Okay. And now let's assume that we want all columns from departure time all the way to origin. From departure time all the way to origin. How do we do this? Flights, select, and then we start with the first one, departure time. Oops. Okay. Now, to specify sequence, you use colon like this. Colon. All right. All the way to origin. So from departure time to origin, like this. All right. And let me run this. And when I run this, you see all the columns from departure time to origin, okay, are specified here. You know, they have been selected. All right. Now, this here, the colon operator is a sequence operator in R. Actually, let me do it in the console, and you may want to try it too. It's just not going to be in the final code, but you know, you can try. If you want a sequence of numbers in R, you can use colon. So let's say I want all the numbers between from 1 to 100. You know, I can just type 1 colon 100, and it's going to show me, it's going to, you know, the output is going to be all numbers between 1 and 100. You know, if you want to go, you don't want to go towards plus infinity, but you want to go towards minus infinity, it is actually possible. So let's say you want all the numbers from 50 to -5. Okay, it's going to do it too. You know, from 50. So now we're moving towards negative infinity now. Okay, it's going to do it. So that same sequence operator can actually be used inside the select function. Okay. In the same way, you know, instead of specify, let's say select a sequence of columns. Now the next one is going to be discard a sequence of columns. All right. Okay, it's actually going to be the same principle. You can actually copy and paste the code that we just wrote. All right. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to add a minus in front of our sequence and add an extra set of parentheses like that. Okay. So basically, select not this sequence between departure time and origin. All right. And when I run it, we have the leftovers, basically, you know, year, month, day, destination, airtime, distance. And that's basically it. Everything else is, you know, out. So that's how you would discard a sequence of columns. All right. Okay. We have more interesting ways, you know, for using the select function. Now, let's assume that for some reason, okay, and I actually did it when I was preparing this data set for you. Let's assume that you are only interested in, you know, column names that contain the word time, okay? And everything else that does not contain the word time is discarded, okay? So select columns that contain a specific all right, so in programming, a series of words, okay, is referred to as a string of characters. So usually if you say a string, it is assumed a string of characters. So this here is a character, okay, and you know that characters are really used, the word is used for text, right? So a string of characters would be, you know, a sequence of characters or a word or something like that. Okay, so how do we do this? So inside the select function, okay, we will use another verb or another function, which is also inside the dplyr package, which is called contains. Okay, contains. And inside that, we'll just use time. Okay, so we want to select all the variables that contain, okay, time. And let's take a quick look at it. So we have departure time, scheduled departure time, arrival time, scheduled arrival time, and then air time. Okay, so everything else has been discarded. So that's actually pretty interesting, guys. Now, this is very useful when you have large data sets. You say people that do things, you know, that have data sets with like genes and stuff like that. This is not really my field, so I don't want to say anything that is not true. But you know, they have a lot of variables, a lot of columns in the data set that have the same string of characters. And this string of characters refer to the same type of gene or something like that, you know. So if you want to select all the columns for that specific gene, then you can just use the contains function inside select and it will pick it. And not only that, like I use contains many times. So currently we are at the end of the quarter where I teach Louisiana Tech University, and and it's time, you know, or it's going to be time very soon to calculate grades, right? So if I only want to, let's assume that I want to you know, analyze the performance of my students on quizzes only. Now, usually the way I name my quizzes, I call them quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, quiz 4, quiz 5, and so on and so forth, right? And exam 1, exam 2, exam 3, and then homework 1, homework 2, homework 3. So I can, if I want to analyze their performance for quizzes, I can just select contains quiz, and it's going to pick all the quizzes, and then I can perform my my analysis on quizzes only. Okay, so this is actually very interesting. And of course, if you want to discard columns that contain a specific string, you just add a minus in front of it, and then that's basically it, and then done. Now, before moving on, I think it's important for me to say that all these things can actually be combined. Okay, now some combinations will not really make sense, but all these things are combined, can be combined. What I mean is, let's assume that you want all the columns that contain the string time, but besides that, you also want the sequence between destination and distance. Okay, so you can actually add that here: destination, distance, and there it is. So it starts with what you specified here, which is the columns that contain the time string, and then you have the sequence between, oh sorry, no, not airtime is not in it. The string between destination and distance. Okay, so they were next to each other actually. Okay, so that's why you've seen it like this: destination and then distance. So you can basically combine all this together. Okay, and it will work. And actually, you know, let's say for example that, all right, so you know what, let me just I'm going to copy and paste it, because the first one has to be what I want to show you. Okay, and then everything else is going to be some sort of modification. Okay, so here I'm adding a string, and let's even assume that, for example, you know, when you run this, you know, contains time, you have the departure time, scheduled departure time. Air time seems like, you know, an odd one here. Okay, because over here you have actual time. Let's assume that you want actual time, and this is the duration of the flight, and let's assume that this is one of the this is one column that you don't want, right? But it just so happens to be here because it has the word time in it. Okay, so you can basically discard it. So over here I'm just going to add minus air time, right? So when you do that, you get exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so these are just other use cases just to show you that you can combine. Okay, now there are a few other things that I want to show you. Select columns that start with a specific string of characters. Okay. All right. Now, when you use contains, okay, it's going to look for the string of characters that you specify here. It's going to look for it everywhere inside the names. Okay. But here we want only whatever string we're going to specify, we want it to be at the beginning of the name. So this is why we said that start with. Okay, how do we do this? Flights, select, starts with. Okay, so that's a function, and then inside you specify the string that you want it to start with. Let's assume that I only want the strings that start with DEP. So for departure stuff, right? I can run it, and as you can see, it will pick DEP time for me. Actually, if I was using the longer data with departure delay and so on and so forth, it would have picked departure delay as well. Okay, because departure delay, I think the name we gave to it was DEP underscore delay, right? So it would have picked it up as well, right? So it's important to know that. And of course, that start, let me add slash end, all right, because you also have ends with, okay. You have starts with, actually let me add a second example with starts with. Let's start with ARR, okay. So as you can see, it picks arrival time. All right, now let's do the ends with now. All right, let me just type it. Flights. Select ends with. Okay. What do we have there? Let's say ends with time. You know, we're going to get the same ones as the, you know, contains time. Okay, time you know, happens to be at the very end of each name, so that's why it picks up the same columns again. So ends with time. Okay, let me check the data again. Do we have any nice ending? Yeah, so everything is kind of different. So yeah, we won't have many examples here. But okay, let's pick more. Let's assume that for some reason you want all the columns that end in E. Okay, the E letter. All right, so it's going to pick everything. You know, distance is part of it now because distance ends in E. All right, so that's basically how to use the select function. Now there's one more that I want to show you. Actually, okay, now let me mention this because you might see it when you're looking at code online, or you know, if you're reading a book. When you use contains, there's another function like this that does almost the same thing, but not quite. Actually, it's the function matches. So let's do, you know, let me run this again. Contains time, okay. Okay, yeah, I added depth and distance. So let me just run the first one. Contains time. Okay, so we know that this is going to be selected. Now, inside select, you also have the matches, okay, matches time. So if you do matches time, you're going to get the same result actually. So contains and matches, as I said, you know, upon first look, you may think that they are equivalent, but they actually are not equivalent. Okay, matches is actually more powerful because it uses something that we call regular expressions. And at some point when we start looking at text analysis, I'm going to teach you regular expressions. Okay, matches is actually very powerful. You can do more with matches than you can with contains. Okay, all right. So I just wanted to mention that because you might actually see it somewhere. We never know. So I wouldn't want you to be surprised. Okay, so we are holding off for now. Okay, and we're going to learn regular expressions. Okay, very powerful stuff. Okay, now now the last thing about select is the everything function, and yeah, I'm going to figure out what to write here in a second, but let's assume that you just needed to reorder things. Now what I mean is this. Okay, oh, flights. Okay, now let's assume that you actually what you want is you're trying to start the entire data set with for some reason. Okay, so it seems like we are back again. Okay, so it appears that we are live again. All right, so okay, we're back. I was going to tell you about the everything function, okay, and to use the everything function. The example that I was going to give was, let's assume that you want to reorder your columns, okay. So you want your data set to start with, let's say, origin, then airtime, then distance. Okay, select origin, then airtime, then distance. Okay. Now, if you run this, it's actually going to select these functions only. It's not going to select anything else, right? But basically, if let's assume that you want everything, you know, you want all your columns. You just wanted to change the order a little bit. Okay, the old order is fine. Just that, you know, you want origin, airtime, and distance to be the first columns. Okay. Well, this is actually, you can do it very simply. Okay. You can just add the everything function. So what everything does, that's a very powerful function. What it's going to do is it's just going to read the columns that you've selected, and it's going to show you all the other columns that have not been selected here. You know, it's actually going to add them after what you selected here. Okay, so let's do it and you'll see. So now we start with origin, airtime, and distance, and all the other columns in their original order, okay, are showing, as you can see, right? And so guys, as you can see, this is pretty powerful stuff. Pretty powerful stuff. Okay, so it really depends on you and how you want to use it. And once again, if maybe you know there are still some columns that you're trying to discard. Okay, let's assume that all the time variables, you don't want them. All the variables that you know that have time in it, let's assume you don't want them, but you still want these ones here to be the first ones, but and then you want everything else. Let me try. So you want these ones to be the first ones. You want to discard all the variables that contain the word time, and then after these first ones, you know, these first columns, and after discarding all the variables that contain time, you want everything else, you know. All right, and that's exactly what you have there. Oops. Oh, my bad. I think. Oh, my bad. I think I have to put it here. Oh, no. Wrong. Okay, so if I do this, okay. Yeah, actually I'm trying to remove time and I have airtime here. Which is actually, so I'm actually being illogical by writing this code. So let me just specify these two, okay. All right, and now I can say, okay, add everything after origin and distance, and then out of that everything, remove the time variables, okay, and that's exactly what we got. So let me explain this again. So we start with origin and distance, as you can see. All right, guys, so we are back. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical issues right now. I'm not really sure why this is happening, and I am really sorry about that. Okay, can you please let me know in the chat, you know, if you can hear me, if everything is okay? Okay, all right, thank you, Leonard. Okay, we're back, so that's great. Now, I know that some people are currently rebooting or they are refreshing the page. Okay, is anyone else here? Okay, all right, so I guess everyone is here because I see that the number of people. Okay, that's great, okay. All right, let's continue then. All right, wonderful. So I was trying to explain what I just did here. Okay, guys, you here. Akisi, thank you. All right, so over here, I am specifying the two columns that I want, origin and distance, and you can see origin, distance, okay? Then after that, I say, okay, then add everything else after that, okay? Then what it will do is it will add all the other 12 columns because we have 14 columns in total, right? So it will add all the other 12 columns. But then out of the 12 columns specified by everything, it's going to take out contains time like this. Okay, it's going to take out the columns that contain the time string of characters. Okay, so that's basically what is happening here. All right, guys, so it's as I was saying, this is really what we need to know about the select function. And I was basically looking for a good comment to put here. Okay, let's just say the everything function. Okay, so these are just some use cases for the everything function. And as you can see, all these extra functions that I just taught you, like contains, matches, starts with, ends with, everything, okay, all these can only be used in the select function. Okay, it's actually a little, it's deeper than that. Okay, but it's mostly okay for what I'm teaching you. It's inside the select function that you would see it. Okay, so Leonard is asking that I restart. Okay, I guess. Okay, we're really having a lot of issues, guys. I'm really sorry. All right, so it appears that we are back. I just rebooted my computer. Hopefully, we won't have the same issues again. Okay, guys, so this is the select function. Man, that was a difficult journey, uh, getting to understand how to use the select function. So it might actually be very useful, for your purpose. So you can basically use the select function whenever you need. But I want you to realize something. We did not really need to use it so far, and that's why I waited before teaching it to you. So if you want to add more data, if you want to change data, like for example, we had distance in miles, and so if you want to change distance in from miles to kilometers, you don't need to select that. You don't need to discard every other column but the distance column before you can do that sort of manipulation on the distance column. I hope you understand what I mean, right? If you have all your data, you can keep working with all your data, and if you don't need any column, you can just decide to not do anything with it. It's not going to matter, right? But sometimes you just want to discard some columns because they annoy you or something like that. And this happens to me as well. Like for example, I told you about working on quizzes and exams, but my university uses a learning management system that we call Moodle. Okay, Moodle is Moodle. It's an open source learning management system, to manage schools and things like that. Now, when I download the spreadsheet for my student scores from Moodle, it comes with so many columns. So the spreadsheet has some columns that are really not needed, and I'm not even sure why they are there. So when I start analyzing my students' data, the first thing that I do is I select the columns that I'm interested in, and everything else is just discarded. Okay, and I keep that data that I selected. All right. So that's basically it. Now there are a few more functions that I want to show you, and then we'll call it a day. All right, so the next one that I want to show you is still for data manipulation. It's the case when function. Okay. And it's maybe it wasn't such a good idea to mix everything, but anyway, you're learning, and that's the most important. Okay. Okay, you know what? I'm going to let you know what to write here in a second. I want to show you how it works. Now, remember how we learned the if-else function? Okay, the if-else function was really interesting because you actually used it in your homework. You could evaluate a condition, and based on whether this condition is satisfied or not, a certain value was returned. Okay, you used it for the I think we called it cold status column or status, depending on how you pronounce it, and you use it for the windy status column as well. All right. Now the if-else function is very powerful. It's really good. The only limitation is that it is limited to only two outputs or two conditions. So or one condition actually. You only specify one condition, and if it is true, there's one value that you get. If it is false, then there's another value that you get. All right. What if there are more conditions that you want to specify? Okay, and use these conditions to output or to return more values. Okay, so what if, right, you had a situation like that? And that's exactly what we're going to do. And actually, we're going to use the select function because you see, I can't really use the view function. Oh, actually, I haven't even shared my code again. So let me do it. Okay, so I was saying that I restarted and I haven't, loaded my packages and stuff. So let me do it and import my data. as well. Okay. All right, so as I said, I can't really use the view function, and the select function is actually going to be very helpful in the case like that, because I can just select the columns that I want to show you and whatnot. All right, so right now we have I've been using the flash data set only because it's the biggest one, and we have a lot of examples that we can give here. Now let's assume that we want to do something about distance. Okay, so just so we can see the values for distance, I'm going to okay, let me start with the data. Select distance, All right, so now I can only see this. Okay, now let's assume that we want to categorize the different distances here. Okay, and want to categorize them by okay, guys, I'm seeing your messages, Laura and Akisi, thank you. Close, far, and maybe a third one because we want more conditions. Okay, so let's say close, medium, and then far. Okay. Oh no, let's actually do more than that. Let's say very close, fairly close, okay, fairly far, and then very far. So okay, just so that we can use as many conditions as possible. Let's do this. So we want to add a new column, and because we want to add a new column, we'll use the mutate function, right? So that's mutate here, and that column we're going to call it let's call it distance, and let's call label. Okay, we want to give it a label: very close, close, fairly close, and so on and so forth. All right, now if we only had two options, maybe close and far, then the if else function would have helped, but because we have more than two conditions, that's when you use the case when function. Okay, now because we have many conditions, after case when you open the parentheses, it's a good idea to break a line here, and this is where we're going to have all our different conditions. Okay, so the conditions are going to be on the distance function. Okay, sorry, on the distance column. I'm sorry, not it's not a function, it's a column. All right, so let's say distance less than or equal to, I don't know, 500 miles. So let's say if it is less than or equal to 500 miles, then it's going to be a short strip. Okay, or let's say close. We're just going to give the label close. Now, in order to give the label, you have to use the tilde here, like that, the tilde symbol. Now, if you use a QWERTY keyboard, tilde is just above tab. Okay, but you need to press Shift and then press the button which is right above tab. Okay, that's how you get the tilde. Now, close here would be a character, it would be text, right? So I need to use quotations for that. So this is close, like that. Okay, now comma for the next condition with its label there. Let's say distance greater than 500, of course, because 500 is already included in the first one. Greater than 500, and remember we briefly talked about this when we were looking at the filter function. Okay, and distance is less than or equal to, let's say 2,000 miles. Okay, tilde, let's say fairly close. All right, fairly close. Now the next one is distance strictly greater than 2,000. And if you don't know where the tilde is and all that, just copy my code. I gave you the link in the Slack channel. Just copy my code and you should be fine. Okay, so distance greater than 2,000, and let's say strictly less than 5,000. Okay. oh no, we're going to say that this is far. Okay, comma, and then the last one is less than or equal to 5,000. Let's add less than or equal to 5,000. All right, and for the last one, let's say if it is strictly greater than 5,000, okay, it gets the label very far. Okay, that's basically it. All right, now let me run this, and you'll see what happens. That's it, you know. So we had to use the mutate function because the mutate function allows us to add more columns to our data. But then the way this data was actually made, okay, the way it was made, it was created using the help of the case when. And again, it's just like if else, you know, when we use the if else function. But then case when is more flexible in the sense that it allows you to include more variables, more conditions. So in this case, we have 4 different conditions. Okay, we have 4 different conditions, as you can see. All right, and because we know data analysis, we can actually look at the count, like in all the flights that, you know, all these airlines send people to, you know, all these cities that these airlines send people to, how many are fairly close, how many are close, how many are far, and how many are very far. Okay, so we're looking at counts here. So you can actually go ahead and straight away use the count function, or if you prefer group by, summarize with the n function, you can do that as well. But let's just use count, okay? And with the count, we're going to use it on distance label. We can sort, okay? Uh-oh. I did not. This closest. Yeah, guys, I'm really not sure. You know, like when I separate it, it works, but when I put it in the pipe, it's not working for some reason. I'm not sure. Okay, guys, I'm gonna look into it and then get back to you with answers as to why it wasn't working, so that we don't waste time. Okay, but this is basically how the case when function works. Now I want to show you another case here. Let's say that now over here I am looking at the weather data set, and let's do something on temperatures. Okay, let's do some conditions on temperatures, and we're going to use that to we're going to use the values in temperatures to calculate another or to add another column. And Laura says that the same thing happens to her. Okay, Laura, I'm going to look into it, and I will definitely find what was wrong with this. I'm not really sure why this is not working, honestly. Oh, okay. Oh no, you see, oh man, I mistakenly selected my entire code and run everything. So all the view, all the calls to the view function were run. So, and I think that the live code is not working anymore, I think. And if that's the case, please let me know. Okay. All right. So let's do something. As I said, we're going to do something on temperature. All right. So over here, we can add something here. Categorize or split flight distance into 4 categories. Okay, so that's what we did here. All right. Okay, so weather, and what we're going to do this time is and please say something in the chat, guys. If you are back, please say something in the chat. Okay. All right. Thank you, Laura. Okay. Thank you for letting us know. Okay. So weather, mutate. Okay. Now this is something specific that I want to show you. All right. Thank you very much, Kinley, Leonard, and everybody else. Okay, let me just select the temp column. Of course, in a real analysis, you don't want to select a single column and then do anything on it. I mean, you can just work on it like that. You don't need to select it first. I mean, I believe you can see this. Okay, so let me just run it, this part only, so that we can see the kind of temperatures we have. Now let's assume that you only want to focus on the cold part, and for everything else above a certain threshold, you're just going to call it other. Okay, and if it still doesn't make sense, don't worry, it will make sense in a second. We're going to call it temp level, so temperature level. Okay, or let's say cold level. Cold level. Okay, now because the values in cold level are going to depend on the value of another variable. Oh, okay, Romina, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that the live code was out. Yes, let me do it. Oh, Romina, I'm going to do it as many times as needed, not only once more, All right. Okay, so yeah, so again, the values of code level are going to depend on the values of temp. So that's why we write case when, because we're going to use some conditions, and based on whether these conditions are true or not, some values are going to be used for this new column here, cold level. So when it comes to temperature, let's say very cold is below 30 degrees, okay, and we're in Fahrenheit. So temp less than, let's say strictly less than 30 degrees. Okay, this is a numeric variable, but then the output is going to be character. So let's call this very cold. Okay, now if the temperature is greater than or equal to 30 degrees and it is less than 50 degrees, guys, I'm just saying things, okay? You might not agree with these values, but that's not really the point, right? So let's say this is cold, and when the temperature is greater than or equal to 50 degrees, okay, and temperature less than, I don't know, 65, okay, we're going to call it bearable. Okay, you can I can bear it, I guess. Okay, now let's say for everything else, okay, for everything else which has not been specified here, you want a specific value. Akisi, it's not in the chat, it's in the live code is in the on the Slack channel. That's where I posted it. I don't have access to the chat right now for some reason. Okay, now for everything else, okay, I'm really not sure why the people who designed case when went about it like that. But if you want to specify a given value for everything else, in other words, for all the values that don't fall into these categories, okay, all the values that do not satisfy these three conditions, okay, to specify that, you use true. So true means for everything else. Why, guys? Please don't ask me. I'm not really sure, but this is really how they did it. Thank you very much, Kinley. Thank you for posting it here for everybody. Okay, so this will be others. Okay, like that. All right. So this is really what I wanted to show you here. True is for everything else that you have not specified. Okay, so it's going to look for all the values that don't fall into these categories, and it will just give it the value others. Okay, so let's run it. And when you run it, of course, you see cold, cold, cold. This is January, right? So that's in the winter, and we can actually try to yeah, I can't use the view function, but please, guys, go ahead and use the view function. But let me try once again to count. Actually, this time around, let me group by cold level, okay, and let me summarize using the end function. Okay, all right, so this works. I'm not sure why count is not working here, but yeah, that's it. So in these places, you have more instances of others. Oh no, more instances of cold. Huh? Okay, yeah. I mean, New York is up north. You have more instances of cold than everything else in terms of number of hours. Okay, and the very cold. And again, this is because I specified anything below 60, 50 as cold, right? For other people, depending on your different thresholds, you would choose different values here. Okay. All right. So this is how to use the case when function. Um, and it's very powerful. Again, you can use it in many different situations, and you can dynamically create new columns like that. Again, it's if you want the big brother of if else, okay, just that it allows you to use more than more than one condition. You can use as many conditions as you need, and the conditions can really be anything, guys. Okay, so over here in our use cases, we used columns that are inside the same flights dataset, or here we use the column that is inside weather, but your conditions could be anything. Okay, and uh, uh, if you have data, okay, you can basically use this data to make the conditions. Okay, so Kinley is asking a question. Can you explain the values in others once? Does it mean below 30 degrees and above 65 degrees? Actually, below 30 degrees would be very cold. Anything from negative infinity to 30 degrees would be very cold. So others would be above 60 degrees, basically. I mean, based on what we have done here. Actually, this is actually a very good question. So again, others would be all the values that are not covered, but below 30 degrees is covered by here. So if you had a negative value somewhere, it would go to very cold. Now let's actually just choose a specific um, interval, and let's just say life is good or something like that. You will understand what I mean. And the reason why I'm selecting again is because I don't want to use the view function to see everything. Okay, I just want to focus on the columns that we are interested in. So mutate. Okay, let me just call it cold level again. Case when. For this, I don't really need case when, to be honest, but I just want to show this to you. So let's say if the temperature for me, based on my tolerance to the cold, if the temperature is greater than or equal to, let's say, 70, and it is less than or equal to, let's say, 85, okay, for me life is good. Okay, now true means everything else. Okay, everything else. So right here we are inside a specific interval, and that interval is between 70 and 85. But then everything else would be below 70 and above 85. So that's what this here would be. Life's not so good. Okay, all right, and yeah, of course, life's not so good in terms of temperature. In January, basically, because it's really cold. All right. So Kinley, I hope that this answers your question. But of course, if this is what I wanted to do, then I could have just used if else for that. Okay. Let me actually get the exact same result using the if else function, which you already know. Okay. I know I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but case when is when you need to use more than one condition. Okay, so I'll just say if else. Okay, and let me just specify this condition here. So I need this condition to be satisfied. Okay, now after the first comma, if it is true, let me break a line. If it is true, life is good. Okay, then comma. Okay, break a line. If it is false, life's not so good. Okay, and I'll get exactly the same thing. So here I have only one condition, so if else works. Okay, all right, so we are back. Yeah, again, I was going to wrap up anyways, but guys, we've learned a few functions today. The first function that we learned was the select function, which we used actually after that. after talking about it, the select function is a good function. You know, if you have a very large data set with many columns, you want to discard some of them, you can use the select function. And actually, I also showed you some, you know, smart ways of selecting the different columns that you are interested in for your analysis. Okay, so that's the first function that we learned. Then we learned about the case when function. Uh, you know, and that's a very important function also to know, especially if you want to create some extra variables based on the values of other variables. This would actually be how you would want to use case when. Now, one thing that I want to say is, okay, I said I was going to wrap up, but let me show this to you. I was going to say that, you know, in the conditions here, we've always used the same variable for conditions, but you don't need to use the same variable. You can actually mix. The conditions could be over many variables, you know. Okay, actually the example that I was going to give before we had the internet connection problems was the grading system in the United States is, you know, A, B, C, D, and F. You know, you have other letters, but these are the main ones, and it depends on what your score is. So a 90 and above in my university would be an A. Between 80 and 90 would be a B, and so on and so forth. So when I assign grade letters to my students, I use case when. Okay, so I calculate their averages, and once I get their averages, I use case when on the average. So case when, the first one, grade strictly greater than or equal to 90, then A. Grade between 80 and 90, B. Between 70 and 80, C, and so on and so forth. So I use case when when I calculate grades. Okay. Now this is the example that I was going to show you. Now in your homework, you have to do cold status and windy status. So let me recode it very quickly. Okay, so for that we'll need temp and we'll need wind speed. Okay, and let me just do something very quick. Mutate cold status. You can actually break lines like this between parentheses. Sometimes I like doing it too. So if else, if the temperature is less than, you know, let me just say something, you know, strictly less than 50, then I'll say it's cold. If not, then it's not cold. I'm going to do it wind status. I think we called it the windy status. Let me copy and paste this. Now, of course, this is if wind speed, okay, strictly greater than 16 miles per hour, it's windy. Oh, no. Otherwise, not windy. Okay, now what I wanted to show you is this. You can actually, no, I don't even need to add another one. So I can mutate and let me call it state of life. And okay, let's say that I'm going to say life is only good when it's not cold and not windy, but for everything else, oh, okay, let's use two cases. Okay, state of life case when, I'm going to break another line here. So I want cold status equals not cold, and windy status equals not windy. Okay, so you see now I'm actually having two conditions that are using two different columns, right? And let's say that this is when life's good. Oh man, my typing is weird today. Life's good. Okay, now let's add another one. Now if it is cold and windy, so cold status, cold, and windy status, windy, okay, life's not good. Okay, and then we can add for everything else, it's okay. All right. So this is an example of, you know, using different columns to have different types of to basically get different conditions, you know. And so this is something that you may also want to do. Oh, call the wind status and not windy status this time. That's why it's not working. And it is status, not status. Oh no, Control Enter. All right. So now you see we have state of life, and you can do this using. You can obtain this column using the code provided here. Alright guys, so this is what I had for you today. I am really sorry about all the issues with the connection. I'm not really sure what happened. I've been using the internet since morning and it's been working fine, but you know, it stopped working fine the minute I started streaming for some reason. But guys, the recording is going to be available, so please watch it for the parts that you missed when the connection was acting up. Okay, so guys, you take care and God bless, and I'll see you on Tuesday.